The research station Helios hung like a pearl in the darkness of deep space, its gleaming white surfaces reflecting distant starlight. Inside, Dr. Senna Patel adjusted her microscope for the 1000th time, dark circles under her eyes betraying countless sleepless nights. The specimen under her lens represented humanity's first contact with truly alien life, cellular structures unlike anything in Earth's biological record. Dr. Patel, they're here. Her assistant's voice trembled slightly over the intercom. The Lyrian delegation has docked. Senna's heart raced as she straightened her lab coat. After months of preparation, the moment had arrived, humanity's first diplomatic meeting with the Lyrian species. As lead xenobiologist, she would be responsible for ensuring no biological contamination occurred during the encounter. The airlock cycled with a soft hiss. Senna held her breath as the inner doors parted, revealing 3 tall, elegant figures. Their iridescent scales shifted colors in the station's light, and their large, multifaceted eyes seemed to take in everything at once. The lead delegate stepped forward, moving with impossible grace. I am Kirix, Chief Cultural Liaison of the Lyrian Concordat. The aliens' translator device rendered their melodic speech into crisp English. We are honored to meet the children of Earth. Senna noticed how Kirix's head frills quivered slightly, a sign of anxiety, according to their preliminary research. The alien was just as nervous as she was. Welcome aboard the Helios Research Station. I'm Dr. Senna Patel, Xenobiology Lead. As she guided the delegation through decontamination protocols, Senna couldn't help but notice how Kirix seemed to watch her movements intently. The alien's eyes tracked her hands especially, and they maintained careful distance despite the confined space. During the official welcome reception, Senna overheard fragments of conversation between 2 junior Lyrian delegates, predator species, and dangerous hunting adaptations. She'd learned enough of their language to catch the general meaning, and something clicked into place. The Lyrians were herbivores. To them, humans must appear terrifying, forward-facing eyes, exposed teeth, high-efficiency bipedal movement perfect for pursuit predation. No wonder Kirix watched her hands, they were literally built for grabbing prey. Later, alone in the observation dome, Senna found Kirix studying Earth's distant sun. Beautiful, isn't it? She asked, keeping her distance. The alien's scales rippled with surprised colors. Dr. Patel. Yes, though different from our home star. Much like how your species is different from ours. A pause. You've realized what we are to each other, haven't you? Senna nodded. You're herbivorous. We must seem like monsters to you. And yet, Kirix's head frills extended slightly, you choose to reach out in peace. To learn, to understand. It is, not what our evolutionary history would suggest. That's the thing about humans, Senna smiled, careful not to show teeth. We've learned to be more than what evolution made us. We still have our predator instincts, but we choose how to use them. Usually for protection now, not hunting. Kirix moved closer, their anxiety visibly warring with curiosity. Your species fascinates us. You could have remained isolated, hostile. Instead, you seek connection, even with those who must seem alien to you. Isn't that what you're doing too? Senna asked softly. Standing here, talking to a predator. The alien's scales shifted to deep blue, amusement, she'd learned. Perhaps we are not so different after all. An alarm blared through the station, shattering their moment of connection. Emergency in Lab 3, the computer announced. Containment breach detected. Senna's blood ran cold. Lab 3 housed their most dangerous specimens. Without thinking, she grabbed Kirix's arm to pull them toward safety. The alien froze, every scale bristling with fear. In that frozen moment, predator and prey stared at each other. Then Kirix deliberately relaxed, placing their life in Senna's hands. Lead the way, Dr. Patel. I trust you. Those 4 words changed everything. As they raced through the station's corridors, Senna realized that trust, not technology, not biology, would be the bridge between their species. Sometimes the greatest barriers weren't physical at all. The containment breach turned out to be minor, easily contained. But that moment of trust between human and Lyrian marked the beginning of something extraordinary. Perhaps their differences weren't obstacles after all, but opportunities to become more than evolution intended. That night, watching the stars with Kyrix, Senna realized they'd both taken the first steps on a much longer journey, one that would challenge everything both species thought they knew about themselves and each other. The shared dining hall aboard Helios Station presented a unique challenge. Senna watched as Kyrix and the other Lyrian delegates examined their specialized food dispensers with obvious discomfort. Even with separate facilities and carefully segregated meal times, the mere concept of sharing eating space with predators seemed to unsettle them. "Your eating habits are fascinating," Kyrix commented, their scales shifting through nervous patterns as they observed Senna's sealed lunch container. "Though I admit, many of our people find it disturbing." "Because we consume other living things?" Senna asked, keeping her voice gentle. She'd learned to modulate her tone around the Lyrians, whose sensitive hearing could pick up subtle aggressive undertones. "Not just that." Kyrix's head frills fluttered. "It's the preparation. The way you transform raw materials. Some believe it indicates a concerning level of technological aggression." Senna paused, fork halfway to her mouth. "You mean cooking? That's considered aggressive? Using controlled destruction to alter food's fundamental nature?" Kyrix's scales rippled. "Many see it as a warning sign of broader destructive tendencies." The conversation might have been awkward, but Senna recognized its importance. These cultural exchanges, however uncomfortable, were crucial to building understanding between their species. "Would you like to observe our food preparation process?" she offered. "Not the meat-based meals, of course, but perhaps our plant-based cooking. It might help dispel some misconceptions." Kyrix's colors shifted rapidly: surprise, fear, curiosity, and finally, determination. "That would be educational. Though our security team will insist on proper safeguards." Later that evening, in the station's cultural exchange lab, Senna demonstrated the simple act of making vegetable soup. She'd chosen the dish carefully, all plant-based ingredients that the Lyrians could verify as safe. "The heat breaks down cell walls," she explained, letting Kyrix examine the cooking process through their sophisticated scanning devices. "It makes nutrients more accessible and helps eliminate harmful bacteria." Like external digestion, Kyrix mused, their scientific curiosity overtaking their instinctive fear. "We achieve similar results through bacterial symbiosis in our digestive systems." The moment was interrupted by a junior Lyrian delegate bursting into the lab, scales flashing warning colors. "Chief Liaison. The humans, they're engaging in aggressive display behavior in the exercise facility." Senna's heart sank as she followed Kyrix to the gym. Through the observation window, they watched several crew members sparring in their regular martial arts practice session. To the Lyrians, it must look like ritualized combat. "It's not what you think," Senna began, but Kyrix's reaction surprised her. "Fascinating," the alien breathed, pressing closer to the window. "They're pulling their strikes. Maintaining control. This isn't combat training, is it? It's discipline training." "Yes." Senna felt a surge of hope. "It's about control, focus, and respect. Learning to understand and direct our capabilities, not just use them." Like your cooking, Kyrix's scales shifted to deep thought patterns. Taking something potentially destructive and transforming it into something beneficial. They turned to Senna, head frills extending fully, a sign of openness she'd never seen them display before. "We may have misunderstood more than just your eating habits." That evening, Senna received an unexpected request. The Lyrian delegation wanted to share one of their meals with her. Not just in the same room, but at the same table, a profound gesture of trust from a species that instinctively feared predators. The meal was unlike anything Senna had experienced. Living plants that responded to specific biochemical signals, creating complex flavor and texture combinations. The Lyrians demonstrated their own form of food preparation, a sophisticated biological programming that made Earth's cooking look primitive in comparison. We alter our food too, Kyrix explained, just through different means. Perhaps we're not so different after all. As they shared the meal, Senna noticed the other Lyrians gradually relaxing, their colors shifting to more comfortable patterns. They were beginning to see past their evolutionary prejudices, recognizing that difference didn't always mean danger. Tomorrow, Kyrix announced, I would like to learn more about your martial arts. Not to participate, they added quickly, scales flickering with amusement at the thought, but to understand. If we're to build true cooperation between our species, we must move past our instinctive fears. Senna nodded, understanding the magnitude of what was happening. Every small step, every shared meal or cultural exchange, was helping to bridge millions of years of evolutionary programming. It wasn't just about food or exercise, it was about proving that biology wasn't destiny. The stars outside the station's windows seemed to shine a little brighter that night, witnessing the slow but steady progress of two very different species learning to see past their differences and find common ground in their shared curiosity about each other. The emergency alarm blared through Helio Station at 0300 hours, jerking Senna awake. She was rushing to the door before the computer could finish announcing, critical failure in primary life support. Backup systems engaged. In the corridor, she nearly collided with Kyrix, whose scales were pulsing with emergency colors. The environmental systems in our quarters are malfunctioning, they reported, voice steady despite their obvious distress. Temperature dropping rapidly. The whole station's affected, Senna confirmed, checking her tablet. The environmental systems were going haywire, and the backup systems weren't stabilizing as they should. We need to get to engineering. The Lyrians were particularly vulnerable to cold, their reptilian biology requiring careful temperature regulation. Already, Senna could see Kyrix's movements becoming sluggish as the station's temperature plummeted. Your quarters, she decided quickly. They're closest to the environmental control hub. We can access the systems from there and your thermal regulation units might buy us some time. Kyrix hesitated only a moment before nodding. Under normal circumstances, inviting a predator species into private Lyrian quarters would be unthinkable. But these weren't normal circumstances. The Lyrian residential section was a marvel of bioengineering, walls lined with living tissue that usually maintained perfect environmental conditions. Now those same walls were failing, their color fading as the cold seeped in. The neural interface is there, Kyrix pointed to a complex organic terminal. But it's calibrated for Lyrian biology. I don't know if. Then we work together, Senna interrupted, already pulling out her diagnostic tools. Your interface, my engineering skills. The station systems are hybrid technology anyway, human and Lyrian. Working side by side, they began tracing the cascade of failures through the station systems. Kyrix's intimate knowledge of Lyrian biotechnology complemented Senna's expertise with traditional engineering. But the cold was taking its toll, Kyrix's movements grew increasingly uncoordinated as their body temperature dropped. Without thinking, Senna moved closer, sharing her body heat. Kyrix stiffened momentarily, evolutionary instincts screaming danger, but necessity overcame fear. They leaned into the warmth, scales gradually regaining some of their luster. There, Senna pointed to a strange pattern in the diagnostic readings. The biological and mechanical systems are fighting each other. Something's convinced them they're incompatible. Like our species were meant to be. Kyrix's voice carried a hint of irony despite their condition. The systems are mirror images of our own prejudices. They worked frantically, Senna's fingers flying over her interface while Kyrix communicated with the biological systems through their neural link. Other crew members, both human and Lyrian, reported similar problems throughout the station. Everything hinged on getting these two fundamentally different systems to work together. It's not about making them identical, Senna realized, watching the interaction patterns. We've been trying to force them to operate the same way. But they need to complement each other, work to their own strengths. Kirix's head frills extended in understanding. Like this, they adjusted their neural interface, no longer trying to override the mechanical systems but instead creating a harmonious interaction pattern. Senna quickly matched the mechanical systems to complement rather than compete. Gradually, warmth began returning to the station. The living walls regained their healthy glow as mechanical and biological systems found a new balance, working together more efficiently than ever before. Well, Senna smiled as emergency teams began reporting all clear throughout the station. I'd say that was a successful example of interspecies cooperation. Indeed. Kirix's scales had shifted to a pattern Senna had never seen before, something between amusement and affection. Though perhaps we should work on less dramatic opportunities for collaboration in the future. The crisis had forced them to move past ingrained barriers, but its resolution proved something even more important. Their differences weren't just obstacles to overcome, but potential strengths when properly understood and applied. Later, reviewing the incident logs, Senna realized that the system failure had been inevitable. The original integration protocols had been based on assumptions of fundamental incompatibility between human and Lyrian technology. Their solution hadn't just fixed the immediate problem, it had created a new template for true cooperation between their species. Your body heat, Kirix commented during the review session, it saved more than just my physical functioning. It proved that what we fear can also protect us, if we let it. Senna nodded, understanding the deeper meaning. Every barrier broken, every fear overcome, brought their species closer to genuine partnership. The station's hybrid systems now stood as a living metaphor for what they could achieve together. The stars beyond the station's windows witnessed another small step forward, not just in technology, but in the greater challenge of bringing two vastly different species together in true cooperation. The message that changed everything arrived during what should have been a routine cultural exchange session. Senna was demonstrating Earth music to a fascinated group of Lyrians when the station's AI interrupted with a priority alert. Incoming transmission from Lyrian High Command, the AI announced. Classification, Omega Priority. Senna watched Kirix's scales shift to alarm colors as they received the message through their neural interface. The other Lyrians reacted similarly, their usual graceful movements becoming sharp and agitated. What is it? Senna asked, though part of her already knew. Nothing good ever came with an Omega classification. A rogue faction, Kirix's voice trembled slightly. They've stolen experimental bioweapons from our research facilities. Weapons designed specifically to target predator species. The implications hit Senna like a physical blow. They're coming here. The station's hybrid systems, Kirix confirmed. They believe we've gone too far in cooperating with predators. They intend to make an example of Helios. The next hours were a blur of emergency preparations. The station's defenses were formidable, but they hadn't been designed to withstand an attack from Lyrian biotech. Worse, the rogue faction had inside knowledge of their systems. They'll try to turn our biological components against us, Kirix explained during the crisis meeting. The weapons were designed to create a cascading failure in predator neural systems. Once released into the station's biotech interface, it would spread through the entire environmental system, Senna finished. Affecting every human aboard. She looked around the conference room, seeing the fear in both human and Lyrian faces. Everything they'd built together was at risk. We can evacuate the human crew, someone suggested. Get them to safety before. No, Senna and Kirix spoke simultaneously. They shared a look of understanding. Running away would only prove their point, Senna continued. That our species can't truly work together. Besides, the station needs both crews to function properly now. Then we fight, Kirix's scales shifted to determination patterns. Not as separate species, but as one crew. The rogue ship arrived 12 hours later. It was smaller than expected, but bristling with hybrid weapons, twisted versions of the cooperation they'd achieved on Helios. "They're attempting to access our biological systems," the science officer reported. "Trying to override our security protocols." Senna felt the station shudder as the attackers launched their first assault. But something was different. The hybrid systems they'd rebuilt after the environmental crisis weren't responding as the rogues expected. "They're using old protocols," Kirix realized, monitoring the biological interfaces. "They don't understand how we've evolved our systems. Or how we've evolved ourselves," Senna added, watching human and Lyrian crew working seamlessly together, each compensating for the other's vulnerabilities. The battle that followed tested everything they'd learned about cooperation. While the rogues tried to force their way through their defenses, the station's crew demonstrated what true synthesis between species could achieve. Lyrian biotechnology adapted to protect human neural patterns. Human engineering strengthened Lyrian biological systems. Each attempt by the attackers to exploit their differences only highlighted how those very differences made them stronger together. The turning point came when the rogues launched their primary weapon, a biological missile designed to override the station's environmental controls. But instead of finding vulnerable, separate systems, they encountered something new, a true hybrid defense created through mutual trust and understanding. "Their weapon," Kirix reported, scales flickering with amazement, "our systems are actually adapting it, using their own technology against them." The rogue ship retreated an hour later, their weapons useless against defenses they hadn't believed possible. But the real victory wasn't in repelling the attack, it was in proving that fear and prejudice could be overcome. "They thought our differences made us weak," Senna observed, standing with Kirix in the observation dome afterward. "That predator and prey could never truly trust each other." Instead, Kirix's scales shifted to a pattern of deep contentment, "Those differences saved us." Perhaps that's what they really feared, not our ability to hurt each other, but our ability to grow beyond our evolutionary programming. The stars seemed to shine brighter as they stood together, predator and prey, no longer separated by millions of years of instinct but united by something stronger, the choice to see past fear and find strength in diversity. "What happens now?" Senna asked softly. Kirix's head frills extended in a gesture of optimism. "Now we show both our peoples what's possible when we stop letting our past define our future." Outside the station's windows, the galaxy stretched endlessly, full of possibilities they were only beginning to explore. Together. 6 months after the failed attack, Helios Station had transformed. What began as a cautious diplomatic mission had evolved into the galaxy's premier center for interspecies cooperation. Senna stood in the newly constructed integration hub, watching human and Lyrian scientists working side by side on projects that would have seemed impossible a year ago. "The latest results from the neural compatibility trials are promising," Kirix reported, their scales shimmering with excitement as they joined her. "The medical team believes we can adapt our biotechnology to heal human neural trauma within months. And our engineering advances are already helping develop more efficient environmental systems for Lyrian colonies," Senna added. "Who would have thought that our predator instincts for tracking and pursuit would translate so well into optimizing biological resource distribution?" The station hummed around them, its hybrid systems now serving as a model for new installations throughout both human and Lyrian space. But more remarkable than the technological achievements were the cultural changes. In the station's communal areas, humans now instinctively moderated their movements to avoid triggering Lyrian prey responses. Lyrians, in turn, had learned to read human body language, distinguishing between aggressive and friendly displays. Fear was giving way to fascination. "The High Council is arriving tomorrow," Kirix's scales shifted to a complex pattern of anticipation and pride. "They're finally ready to discuss expanding the integration program to other stations." "Nervous?" Senna asked, noting the slight flutter of their head frills. "Terrified," Kirix admitted with surprising candor. But not of humans anymore. I'm afraid we won't be able to convince them just how much is possible when we move past our evolutionary biases. Senna smiled, remembering their own journey from fear to understanding. Then we'll show them. The demonstration they'd prepared for the council was ambitious, a complete neural interface linking human and Lyrian consciousness. Not for combat or control, but for sharing experiences, understanding each other at the deepest level. Are you sure about this? Kyrix asked as they made final preparations. The council members aren't as evolved in their thinking as we are. Seeing a predator species access Lyrian neural technology might trigger primitive responses. That's exactly why we need to do it, Senna replied, checking the interface connections. Sometimes the only way past fear is to face it directly. The council members arrived with an escort of nervous security personnel. Their scales displayed classic stress patterns as they watched Senna and Kyrix connect to the interface. But what followed changed everything. Through the neural link, Senna shared the human experience of protection, how predator instincts had evolved into a drive to safeguard others. Kyrix revealed the Lyrian perspective of cooperation, how prey species developed complex social bonds to survive. The council members watched in astonishment as human and Lyrian consciousness merged, not in conflict, but in harmony. They saw through each other's eyes, felt through each other's senses, understanding at the most fundamental level that their differences were not barriers but bridges. Extraordinary, the head counselor's scales rippled with wonder. You're not just cooperating, you're evolving together. That's what we've been trying to show, Senna explained after the demonstration. Our species can do more than just coexist. We can help each other grow beyond our limitations. The Council's approval of expanded integration programs was unanimous. But the real victory came later, in private moments throughout the station, a human child learning Lyrian color-shifting meditation, a Lyrian scientist discovering the joy of human music, countless small bridges being built between worlds that evolution had designed to fear each other. I never thought I'd say this, Kyrix confessed one evening in the observation dome, but I'm grateful for those rogues who attacked us. Their fear of our differences pushed us to prove just how powerful those differences could make us. Senna nodded, watching the stars that now seemed to hold infinite possibilities. Fear or friendship, it was always going to be a choice. We just had to be brave enough to choose differently than our ancestors. The station continued its orbit, a shining example of what could be achieved when beings chose to evolve not through conflict, but through understanding. Inside its walls, predator and prey worked together, learned together, grew together, proving that the greatest adaptation of all was the ability to see past ancient fears and recognize the potential in each other. What's next? Kyrix's scales shifted to show curiosity and anticipation. Everything, Senna replied, smiling. We've only just begun to explore what we can become together. Above them, the galaxy sparkled with promise, waiting for two species who had learned that the future belonged not to those who clung to the past, but to those who dared to imagine something new. On Helios Station, that future was already becoming reality, one shared discovery at a time.